Is there one issue that is so important to you that it could be the entire basis of your vote?
The latest NBC News poll puts abortion at the top. Kamala Harris on Fox News, Donald Trump in Chicago.
My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency.
Oh, I want to talk about IVF. I'm the father of IVF.
Both candidates reaching out to voters outside their base and fighting misinformation and tackling your questions one post at a time.
I'm getting so many people who just feel very overwhelmed and anxiety filled.
What America's government teacher says you need to do before Election Day. Welcome to The Brief. I'm Marianne Ahern. This week, it is all about women. White women are the largest voting bloc, and since 2000, the GOP presidential ticket has won the majority of them. They helped former President Trump in 2016, and he improved his margins in 2020. Can Kamala Harris, though, shake that up? But before we get to that, we have three takeaways from this past week.
President Trump, thank you for doing this, as we said. And you heard the reception there.
Donald Trump at the Chicago Economic Club, the first takeaway for this week. The former president focused on his economic message, defending his plan to raise tariffs, especially on foreign-made cars.
If I took those tariffs on, you would be inundated. Every car company would be out of business.
He criticized former President Barack Obama and the media. Kamala Harris has also been invited to speak to the Economic Club, but has not accepted.
Madam Vice President, thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's good to
However, the Vice President's sit-down interview with Fox News' Brett Baer, that's takeaway number two. In a rare move of appearing on the conservative network, Harris tried to appeal to independents and anti-Trump Republicans.
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency.
The 85%.
Harris and Baer frequently talked over each other.
It's a rough estimate of 6 million.
Covering everything from the border to the economy and President Joe Biden's fitness for office.
George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking.
Our final takeaway:
abortion, childcare, illegal immigration.
Trump's all-women Fox News town hall.
Those questions and Trump's answers now.
Audience members asked questions about abortion access.
Some are necessary to save their own lives. Why is the government involved in women's basic rights?
Right, good. I think it's great, and I'm glad you asked it.
Then the discussion turned to IVF.
I'm the father of IVF.
The issue first launched into the spotlight in February when the Alabama Supreme Court ruled embryos created through IVF are children, leading multiple clinics to pause services. State lawmakers later passed a bill protecting the treatments.
We really are the party for IVF. We want fertilization, and it's all the way. And the Democrats tried to attack us on it, and we're out there on IVF even more than them.
Harris's campaign slammed Trump quickly afterward, saying his comments are, quote, an example of exactly why women don't trust him. Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016, let's face it, it made some wonder, can a woman really be president? Kamala Harris has a few things Clinton did not have. Democrats, they are energized over abortion rights and the knowledge that Donald Trump, he can be beaten. Still, it will not be easy to win, and gender is a big factor. This historic moment in 2016 met with thunderous applause in Philadelphia.
Tonight, we've reached a milestone in our nation's march toward a more perfect union. The first time that a major party has nominated a woman for president.
Now 8 years later,
and together, let us write the next great chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told.
A second woman tops the presidential ticket. But Dr. Malia Bowers, a professional lecturer at DePaul University, notes a big difference. Hillary Clinton made the historic nature central to her campaign.
I'm with her. You know, you think back at the DNC when she came out to give her speech and there was that huge thing of the glass ceiling shattering. That kind of imagery, that kind of rhetoric has not really been present for Kamala Harris.
Instead, she believes Kamala Harris has positioned herself as the change candidate.
There's really good research showing that sexism did play a role in Hillary Clinton's loss. in 2016. And so, I think that it is a strategic move to kind of shift the conversation away from identity markers.
You look at her, she's a woman. You look at her, she's black. She doesn't have to say, I'm black and I'm a woman. And for Hillary, it was different. Hillary was the first. It's always different for the first, whoever the first is.
Delmarie Cobb was the Illinois press secretary for Clinton in 2016. Cobb believes 2008 was a stronger year for the former First Lady because she was campaigning more often.
But there was this feeling that we don't have to put her out there, she doesn't have to work as hard because we got this.
Cobb believes Harris's staff has learned from that.
And it's so wonderful to be back in North Carolina. Thank you all.
Yet, Harris faces an uphill battle.
Women are often held to a much higher standard in terms of their qualifications, their competency, their morality, their virtue, and also their likability. So women have to work twice, if not more, as hard as men to show that they are capable of holding an executive position especially.
Research this year from the nonpartisan nonprofit group She Should Run found that 2/3 of women are less likely to consider running for office because politics seems toxic. Illinois House Minority Leader Tony McCumbee echoes that.
I think overall, right now,
people don't want to subject their families to this harsh political environment.
I mean, we had some seats that we couldn't find anybody.
A Republican from Savannah, McCumbee is among the top-ranking women in the state. But initially, she had no interest in politics.
Women are, they're in the home, they're working out of the home, they're active in their church, they're active in their non-for-profits, and then somebody comes forward and says, you know what, you'd be great on a school board, or you'd be great in a city council. And then you're like, no, I wouldn't. I have no time for that.
61% of women surveyed by She Should Run have never considered running for office. Some big barriers: family structure and a lack of financial resources, plus heavy scrutiny over everything, like Hillary Clinton's emails and pantsuits.
She was married to a president, and so she knows all the world leaders, and she's probably the most connected person there is, and she didn't win. So they know how hard it is for a woman to win.
Now a big question: would Harris be where she is without Joe Biden? Cobb says no.
Had there not been a Biden-Harris ticket, she could not have inherited not only his money from the campaign, but his infrastructure.
Let's build a better tomorrow for our beloved children.
Although strides have been made for women since 2016.
I think that polling pretty consistently shows that at least just over 50% of people are extremely excited to have a woman in the White House.
Plus, 2018 brought an influx of lawmakers into Congress, both Republicans and Democrats. What these candidates generally have in common is wanting to make a difference in their community.
Had a local business in downtown Savannah, wanted to put a sandwich board on the sidewalk. The ordinance didn't allow for it, so what do? You go join the city council to change an ordinance, and that's really where it all began.
Why do certain states matter more? Will we have a winner on November 5th? And what political question keeps you up at night? We went to America's government teacher for answers.
Transparent good government does not involve keeping fraudsters in your midst.
Her name is Sharon McMahon, but you may know her as Sharon Says So.
What happened when you pressed the red button?
Former government teacher, now the self-proclaimed Governerd, has more than 1 million followers on Instagram, plus TikTok, a YouTube page, a podcast, and a new book on the New York Times bestseller list. Her mission: correcting misinformation. Why does it spread like wildfire?
When something terrible happens, humans naturally look for an explanation. That's how your brain works. You want to find an explanation for what it is. And when there isn't an explanation that satisfies you, often your brain will just fill in that information. So that's part of it. They're also being told by people with prominent mouthpieces that something is awry, and so they tend to listen to those voices that they trust.
One of the most popular reels on her page, breaking down the Electoral College. So I had to ask, like in Illinois, why don't we matter?
Because of winner take all. The system has evolved to be winner take all, where whoever wins the popular vote in a state gets all of that state's electoral votes, with the exception of 2 states.
And the impact stretches past a seat in the Oval.
They get all of the attention, their issues get all of the focus, and then studies show that after the election, they get more federal money than states that are not battleground states, because the party in power wants to keep that state sort of in their pocket.
Let's look ahead to election night. McMahon says, prepare yourself for the waiting game.
Unless there is a very clear landslide of a winner where that person very obviously within the margins of error, outside the margins of error, that they have won the battleground states that they need to win. There is a possibility that we could know sooner than those couple of weeks. But if it's a repeat of 2020 where it comes down to 11,000 votes in one state and a few thousand votes in another, then I would expect a more protracted recount process where we're in within the 0.5% margins in most states, and they end up doing 2 or 3 different recounts to be sure.
In the days and weeks after Election Day, McMahon says keep your eyes on the courts.
There are already over 100 lawsuits in the works related to the election, and there's absolutely more that are on the desks of lawyers. They're just waiting to plug in the right details and waiting to file those.
I asked what question do followers ask her the most, and it is, what happens if everyone dies? She says there is a succession plan, and people want to know. The latest NBC News poll puts Harris and Trump in a dead heat. So is there one issue that might tip the scales? Coming up next, we zero in on reproductive health. When it comes to election issues, Kamala Harris's greatest strength is Donald Trump's greatest weakness. We delve into reproductive health and their vastly different plans.
No, we're not.
Democrats hope reproductive rights drive voters to the polls in November, like they saw in the 2022 midterms after the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
And now, more than 1 in 3 women in America lives in a state with a Trump abortion ban.
If elected, Vice President Kamala Harris wants to restore the federal right to an abortion. She supports ending the filibuster to pass federal abortion protections. But the question is whether she could get the votes in Congress to accomplish that. She's also vowed to veto any nationwide abortion ban.
So let's take you to Philadelphia now and the first presidential debate of 2024.
Here's what Donald Trump said when pressed during the September debate.
And there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states.
You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail.
The former president says he supports exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And Trump takes credit for the high court overturning the Roe decision.
I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
On the campaign trail, Harris tries to tie Trump to the controversial Project 2025 agenda, which calls for restricting access to abortion pills. Harris backs a Senate bill that establishes protection for people to access IVF, which has been repeatedly blocked by Republicans. Arguably, her strongest messenger on the issue is her running mate, Tim Walz, and his wife, Gwen, who went through fertility treatments.
Donald Trump is the one who took down Roe and put access to IVF at risk. That's a fact.
Trump, though, calls himself a leader on this issue, in August unveiling his proposal to make IVF treatments free for all women, but offering little details on how it would be funded. IVF treatments cost about $20,000 per cycle.
We're going to be paying for that treatment, or we're going to be mandating that the insurance company pay.
Joining us now, Lee Hasselbacher from the University of Chicago, an expert on reproductive health policy. Thank you for being here. Sure. Since the decision of Roe v. Wade, what has happened with abortion bans statewide?
Yeah, so since Roe v. Wade removed the constitutional right to abortion, that means that it's up to the states to determine their access. So Illinois has actually passed a lot of policies to protect abortion access, but a lot of the states around us in the Midwest and throughout have passed bans or had bans that went into effect after Dobbs.
What about those who do support exceptions? Because so many Americans do. Exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. Do most states provide those exceptions?
I would say most of the states that do have some kind of ban in place do.
Illinois has invested more than $23 million for abortion access after an influx of mothers from other states. That's not likely to change, is it?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers we're seeing are going up. Like states like Florida have actually had new bans that go into effect. So people are going to continue to come to Illinois. And I think what's interesting about, sort of the administration and the state's investment in access is it not only benefits folks who are coming from out of state, but it benefits those who are in state as well. And I think what we've heard from, doing interviews with people who have access to Medicaid coverage now or private insurance coverage or access to some of these funds is it really reduces a lot of the obstacles and the burdens for folks, and they really have a chance to get to care sooner, to have some less financial distress in their own lives. So yeah, I think that it's going to be something that will continue, and there'll be continued need for support.
And what about the misconceptions? What are the big misconceptions about abortions and the reason that people get them?
Yeah, I mean, again, we've had a chance in our research to talk to lots of folks who've sought abortion. We've talked to providers, and I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that, this is someone who maybe doesn't understand what it's like to be a parent. And I think, our research has shown that so many people who seek abortion are already parents, they're already caregivers, so they really do know what it takes. And I think, that's important to keep in mind. And I think some of the other sort of misconceptions are that, this is a quick decision, that people aren't thinking this through, or, that there's just sort of this separate category of abortion care versus, the pregnancy-related care that lots of people get throughout their lives.
And what about those who have miscarried? Have they been affected by the abortion bans?
Yeah, I think definitely it's important to remember 15 to 20% of pregnancies result in miscarriage, maybe even more. And I think what people would like to think of as abortion as something separate really isn't. It's, a treatment for, ending a pregnancy, and whether that's because someone's choosing to end a pregnancy or because they need medical intervention to end that pregnancy. And so the more you restrict and ban and put limits on what doctors can do in those situations, the more you're going to have these other consequences where people with miscarriage are affected.
All right, Lee Hasselbacher, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate hearing your information. It's heating up in Indiana. The Indiana governor's race, the gap is getting smaller. We'll talk to both the candidates, and we'll make sure you're ready for next week. The 3 things you need to know. That's ahead. While we're focusing on women and women's issues, there's a contest in Indiana, the race for governor, that might just be settled on those issues. We spoke to both of the major candidates.
One particular policy now voters can...
If abortion is a major issue for voters, the Indiana governor's race will be one to watch. Jennifer McCormick was a Republican, now a Democrat, looks to undo the restrictions Indiana put in place post Roe v. Wade.
It's huge. It's huge. So our poll shows us that, but also the conversations we're having bipartisan with our boots on the ground. And it is just, people are afraid, they're worried, they're scared, they're angry about it. It's, my opponent's wanting to take it even further, and they're looking at birth control and IVF, and they're calling, vaccines are similar to rape.
U.S. Senator Mike Braun, the Republican candidate, disagrees that reproductive rights will be a decisive factor in his contest.
In this case, the legislature would have to be convinced that something needs to be changed. And I think that's disingenuous on my opponent's part to think that that would be realistic. So
you would not direct any changes?
No, because I'm not hearing from the folks that are supporting me that it needs to be done.
Indiana is surrounded by states that have legalized cannabis. Indiana does not even medical marijuana.
I've said all along, I'm going to take a cue from law enforcement. They'll be at the brunt of whatever occurs positively or negatively from it. But I do believe medical marijuana there's a case to be made for it.
Starting with a commission that would move into the space of medical marijuana, making sure we're using it for medical purposes, getting well-regulated industry, and then moving into adult usage. We're looking at around $170 million right off the bat.
Both have proposals, albeit different, on property tax breaks. They also disagree on school choice. We asked them both if democracy was on this year's ballot.
It is on the ballot. It's on the ballot at every level. And when people say, why Indiana? Why are we worried about if it's a deep red state? Well, when you allow that to happen, that's where that extremism becomes even more extreme.
I would hope that everyone agrees that a legal ballot should be cast and a legal ballot should be counted. And I think we're going to find that across the board because everybody's watching it.
And did Donald Trump win in 2020?
No, he did not in 2020.
There's a Libertarian candidate also on the ballot, Donald Rainwater. And there's one more debate in Indiana next week. All right, if we are talking women's issues, then you have to speak to former U.S. Senator and Ambassador Karen Moseley-Braun. Thank you for joining us.
I'm happy. Thank you for having me.
A lot of firsts on your resume, from Cook County executive at the county level to the first African-American U.S. Senator at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Did you make being an African-American woman the centerpiece of those campaigns?
No. I just ran based on the issues and talked to voters. And that was if you will, the secret sauce. I just talked to everybody whether they were supposed to be Republican, Democrat, or Independent. I just talked to people about what I thought, and it worked out.
What about the diversity of women? I mean, obviously there are many views. You know, there's the soccer moms, there's the urban moms. Will reproductive rights still be the glue, the secret sauce of this election?
I believe it will. And I think because women have experiences with that a lot of these guys don't. And so they can speak from their heart. I mean, Melania Trump even. You know, I mean, seriously, you know, the fact of the matter is that women have a special connection to reproductive rights that men don't necessarily have. And so it means it's something that's in their heart as opposed to just in their mind.
This week, Harris has reached out to her base. Are they not energized?
I think they are. From what I've seen, again, I've been out of the country. I just got back. So everything that I saw looked like they were enthusiastic about her. And I'm hoping that holds through November 5th.
Yet, former President Obama speaking to black men and saying, where are you? Might that be a factor in this election? Will black men vote for Harris?
It always is a factor. And I remember getting in real trouble because I once said that sexism was more ingrained and harder to crack than racism was. And I had people just really furious with me, like, wait, how can you say that? Well, because it's been my life experience. My lived experience was that sexism and overcoming the patriarchy was harder than overcoming racism. And you know, that's been my experience, and I was happy to share it with people. As you know, Marianne, I call them like I see them. So.
Well, if you call them like you see them, what do you say? What's going on? This race is very, very tight.
Which doesn't make any sense, but for the patriarchy. I mean, but for the fact that you got guys who are threatened by the idea of having strong women in charge, and they just don't want to go there, and that's what Obama was speaking to, President Obama. And so, you know, you've got these societal and cultural biases that are really hard to overcome in the way. And so she's got to overcome that, and I think she's doing the right thing. She's not talking about it explicitly. She's letting people reach their own conclusions about it. And I think, frankly, that's the only way to play it, because you can't, if you spoke to it directly, you wind up in a quagmire with the church against you. I mean, there's all kinds of implications from that.
All right, you've been very close with President Biden. Should he have stayed in the race? Do you have any second thoughts on that?
You know what? I think he made the best decision for him and for the country. I would have followed Joe Biden to the gates of hell because I know him and I respect him that much and love him that much. But I think he did the right thing under the circumstances. He didn't give me a heads up on it. I mean, I found out about it when everybody else did. But it was really a shocker. But at the same time, he could not have done better than Kamala to stand in his shoes as presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, and I think she's going to do well. I hope so.
All right, we're going to have to wait and see. Thank you very much, former Senator and former Ambassador Karen Moseley Braun. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to do it.
Now, here's what to look for next week. CNN will host a town hall. Kamala Harris has said yes. Donald Trump, so far, has not said yes. But he will be holding rallies in Georgia and New York City. If you're feeling anxious about the election, we leave you with the advice of Sharon McMahon, who says, read your ballot ahead of time so there are no surprises. As for the ballot, you can find it by looking at the QR code on your screen now. That's The Brief. Thanks for checking in.